It is August 3rd. It is 3 different people's birthdays today. I'm not going to name their names, but my first roommate in this house, someone I volunteered with in Costa Rica who went on to medical school, and one of my crushes from Groundswell. So if they ever see this, they will know that. But that's fine. Part of Jubilee not able to be in relations. Oh dear God, heaven forbid anyone find out I have a crush on anyone, right? Anyway, we're working through it. We're working through our relational stuff. Here is, let's see if we can figure out, here's my life story. Bet you there's no relational issues whatsoever. We're going to start with childhood, where I moved around a lot. Mystery. We're going to start my story where it begins in childhood. I was an 80s child, born 2 weeks into the 80s. And that definitely flavored my childhood because it was a different time. I was born in Edmonton, raised in like housing cooperatives. So there were a lot of kids around, a lot of families, and very little parental supervision. So we figured out how to keep ourselves entertained. We were called in for dark. The beginning up till when I was in grade 3 was a very like a fun chaos. Well, we were still an evangelical Christian family going to church twice a Sunday and having that as the cornerstone of our family. Then my dad finished his master's degree in library studies, whatever, being a librarian, and he got a job at the Lethbridge Public Library. So we moved to we didn't move to Lethbridge, we moved to Raymond, which was a small town populated 90% by Mormons, which was not our religion. And so we didn't really fit in, and I had to hang out with mostly my siblings. And my fantasy world probably got even more, it did get more in depth. I spent more time in books and less time with other people. We were with other people. They were trying to convert us to their religion. I was probably trying to convert them to my religion. And so 2023 Jubilee's got to come in. You're going to hear us coughing during all this. My kid in the background coughing and me coughing. This is February 2020. This is the only time we possibly had the C. Long before anyone else had it. I went to 7 different elementary schools by grade 6. Even though there was only like 2 big moves from Edmonton to Raymond, from Raymond to Lethbridge finally, about a year and a half later. So I was constantly having to make new friends without really having the capacity to make new friends. My fantasy life was probably the key to making them, because when you're a child and you have access to fantasy and imagination, and you can bring other people into that world, at least when you're pretty young, that's a pretty great trait to have. However, they outgrew it, right? Kids outgrow fantasy, and I never did. Like my older sister, outgrew fantasy, and so I started playing with my younger brother, and then he outgrew fantasy, and I found friends who that was their niche. So my childhood consisted of moving around a lot, changing friends, having God and Jesus as my central focus, and how important it was that everybody find out about Jesus so that the second coming of Christ could happen. Singing in church on Sundays, reading the Bible. I read the Bible through for the first and only time when I was in grade 4, from cover to cover. Jesus, fantasy, and moving around a lot. That was my childhood. And then just the 80s, we watched TV. We got a Nintendo when I was in grade 6. So my childhood didn't have electronics. We didn't have cable, so we didn't spend a lot of time on television. I read a lot of books, especially with my dad being a librarian, and escaped into those fantasy worlds and created my own. I remember having a field trip where we walked. It was probably like a half an hour to 45-minute walk, and telling this story, which I wish I would have recorded. I remember there was like a big white lion, maybe ripped off from Narnia, which was a series my parents read to us. Like if I had been a kid in the late 90s, I wouldn't have been allowed to read Harry Potter. But because like witchcraft would have been very, very bad. And yet we read Narnia because Narnia was written by a Christian. And then I was allowed to read like R.L. Stein and I don't know, my parents were very wishy-washy. Like some years we would go trick-or-treating, and other years we wouldn't. It kind of depended on which church we were going to, what the flavor of their Christianity was that year. And that is my childhood story from like zero. Did I mention, I recorded this a few times, that I am the middle child of, I have an older sister and a younger brother, which is also very much, you can't not have that flavor of your life. Your sibling order is a huge part of who you are, your family dynamics. And I very much didn't want to rock the boat. I could see my older sister and younger brother needing a lot of attention. And so I kind of slid into the shadows more. I had meltdowns a lot as a young kid, and my parents, being young parents, really didn't like it. So I shut them down, like I shut down my emotions. So I wasn't going to have that impact. I was a fairly happy kid, except when I had meltdowns. And so that's my childhood. Thank you. My adolescence feels like it started when my childhood ended, with the ending of Christianity in my life, when I started to question the infallibility of the Bible and the gospel, and I couldn't make logical sense of it, and I wasn't allowed to question it. That not being allowed to question, expecting to take it on faith, made me not be able to have faith in it. And so this deep, important part of me, this truth I held very strongly to, fell away. And that was huge. And I started to cling much more strongly to logic and science and make sure that I was never duped, never found out that something I held so true would be made false. So I just never held anything so true. And if I did, it was based on logic and science. And even then, 99.9% certain. My adolescence was very different than my childhood because, unlike my childhood where I went to 7 different elementary schools, I went to the same junior high school for 3 years that then funneled into the high school that all of those junior high kids went to. So I effectively went to school with the same kids for 6 years. But my friendship group changed every 1.5 to 2 years. I can trace a lot of the experiences I had, the guys I dated, and the friends that I was friends with, people I ended up being best friends with, to this one event that I went, like on a Tuesday night, we went to a movie because it was cheap movie night. And afterwards, this group of 13 girls that went to a movie, we weren't all friends. We were kind of acquaintances, and it was a bunch of friends together. But having gone to McDonald's after, if I hadn't been there, we wouldn't have met these 2 groups of guys who became, one group became like the love of my 2023, me interrupting. It was True Lies. True Lies is the movie I went to, which was both James Cameron and Bill Paxton. And I watched True Lies on a very specific date, written in my journal. Not that time, not this time, a different time with a boyfriends I have that were slayed in bed watching True Lies on a very specific date. It gets even weirder. I mean, not in this, but just in life. 2023, True Lies. There's also 2023, the TV show True Lies started this year. It's not good, but it started. It's got Faith from Buffy in it. It's got Arnold Schwarzenegger. And it's not a great movie, but it changed my life. Bill Paxton. My life, and one of my best friends married one of the guys, and one of the other ones had like a unrequited love thing with the third one. And then the other group became what was a few guys that I dated, as well as my best friend who made me the necklace, and it's no longer on the planet. And so it's weird to be able to trace so much of what happens to you back to that event, including I went on a German exchange. I exchanged with a German exchange student. So I went to Germany and she came here during my grade 11 year, which I'm going to talk about in my next video on travel. But when I came back, my friend group had changed. And my best friend, I had to choose between my two best friends. And the one that I chose had a new group of girlfriends. And just friends, really. And so that's who we hung out with for the end of grade 11 and grade 12, which was also characterized by me falling in love with her brother, who I couldn't be with because he was away at hockey, but we wrote the letters back and forth to each other. And then right before he got back, we weren't allowed to start dating. My best friend said it wasn't okay. And I was just like, I'm done. I'm sorry, because I just said it. He's who I was watching True Lies with. Yeah, I was late in bed watching True Lies with him. And there was also another piece that was also, what did I just say? Because that was also important. I had to choose between my two best friends, and the one that I chose had a new group of girlfriends, and just friends, really. And so that's who we hung out with for the end of grade 11 and grade 12, which was also characterized by me falling in love with her brother, who I couldn't be with because he was away at hockey, but we wrote the letters back and forth to each other. And that was what else I was going to say. He played hockey. Well, he was away playing hockey for that entire year. And we were writing letters back and forth to each other. The arena he played hockey in was called the Jubilee Arena. Not he played it in there one time. That was where they played hockey, that team, the Jubilee Arena. And then right before he got back, we weren't allowed to start dating. My best friend said it wasn't okay. And I was just like, I'm done with this small town BS. And I moved to Vancouver, where my sister and dad were already living. But one of the other characteristics of my adolescence, as well as like holding on to this logic, was discovering that I was intelligent. I was told to go into remedial math because I couldn't possibly handle regular mainstream math. So between grade 9, junior high, and high school grade 10, I chose to go into the remedial. And when I was there, I got like 99% in all of the tests, which I think if I had been put. Sorry, we're clearly gonna keep doing this. I would party with my friend, right? We'd party at her house. Her parents both worked shift work, and they were fine as long as people weren't drinking and driving. So what was my point of that? Drinking there. What did you previous Jubilee just say? This was so important. It really did. It really was important. That teacher who told me to go into remedial, who was an alcoholic, is actually the father of one of the guy I watched True Lies with, this brother's friends. So while telling that story, it was like, oh yeah, that's my dad. Will in a party with all of that. It's not going to be mentioned in here because Jubilee doesn't see all the interconnections till 2023. Yes, the son of that, the worst teacher you had, was at the parties. All of the tests, which I think if I had been put into regular math, I wouldn't have necessarily gotten 99%. So I wouldn't have felt intelligent. I would have just been probably a C student. But because I was an A student, it somehow made me realize I could be, and was an A student in everything. I got A's throughout high school, having gotten definitely not A's in junior high and not paying attention. And it was kind of because this person underestimated me and told me to go into this that I then ended up realizing I was intelligent. And like I said, I got straight A's in school, which is why I was able to go on to university. And also why, like, the fact that my biology teacher was one of my favorite teachers. She was just amazing. Taking physics, writing horrible stories in the back with my friends, and then acing it like the night before I would go in and understand what was going to be on the test, ace the test, and then like forget it after. And I didn't take chemistry, which is the third science that was offered. And I didn't take calculus because I thought that it was I thought it was like calculating. I thought it was like accounting in my head. It was accounting. And so I didn't take it. But what I did take, I was good at, and it made me feel intelligent. And because I felt intelligent, I was able to get straight A's. So I feel like my adolescence started with the falling away of Christianity and ended when I moved out from right after high school, when I moved to Vancouver because of this heartbreak and pursuing like my dream of going to university, but also very much leaving this small town mentality behind. Thank you. If I'm trying to cover 3 different stories of travel in one video, it's not going to go perfectly. So I just need to come to grips with that and not have to do this yet again. So when I was 16, I went to Germany on an exchange. I had an exchange student come here for 3 months, and my high school had 2 other exchange students. Then the 3 of us, Canadians, went over for 3 months to visit them in their respective cities. So I was the only one in the small city my exchange student was from, town really. But going to Germany was my first time on a plane. It was my first time experiencing true culture shock and being surrounded by people who didn't speak the language that I spoke. And although nearly everyone did speak English, they could speak English. When they were in groups, they were speaking German. I got to walk on streets that experienced World War II. I got to interact with history. And history has never been my favorite subject, but there was something about being there, being present when we were learning that back home in social studies class that was different. Seeing buildings and pictures of them being bombed, seeing the Berlin Wall, and the way that their atrocity of the Holocaust and World War II was taught to children. In grade 5, we were learning about it because I took English classes with the grade 5s because they were learning English while I was learning German. I remember they had these weird skateboards that had a pivot in the middle, and they'd had them for decades, and they could go up hills in them. And I was like, well, why don't we have these? Like, it's only across an ocean. Why don't these exist back where we're from? I feel like kids would like these. And just not realizing just those little things of like, oh, this is different. Not being able to eat peanut butter, trying to make Rice Krispie squares and not being able to find white marshmallows. We had to use colored ones, and they were from like an American Army base store. There were American Army bases. We're sneaking onto one and reading books about some apocalypse while I was like in this deserted barracks. It was interesting. I spent 3 months skipping school and wandering through this small town by myself because I felt out of place in the school. I still went to some classes, but the majority of the time was spent reading and being by myself and experiencing this writing letters back and forth with my friends. But it would take like 3 weeks to ask a question and get a response from them, and our letters would pass each other in the mail in flight. And so my 2 best friends were breaking apart while asking me for advice on this, and I wasn't able to respond. And we'd have the odd conversation, but with the time difference and with the expense of long distance, it was the first time I experienced email. I used my exchange dad's email to email back and forth with my boyfriend at the time. And having a boyfriend while I was that far away and we had like just started dating, it was a very interesting experience going on a German exchange. One I wouldn't change for the world. It gave me so much compassion for people who are forced to move to a different country and not speak the language. Because although it was lonely not being able to speak German for 3 months, if I lived there permanently, I would have had to learn it, and whatever bits I could put together would have eventually been what I was able to communicate. I just took 3 months off of having in-depth, deep conversations, except for I didn't, because I got to have a week in Berlin with the other exchange students. I got to they were Irish, not exchange students, but an Irish class. I think there was like 20 of them that came to the small town I was in for a week. Like I said, I got to like live history and learn that German is not an easy language for me to learn. Then, in case I hadn't learned that lesson yet, that language is not my strong point. I volunteered to go to Costa Rica in between my high school and university, which ended up having me take 4 years off between the two, which I'll cover in my university video. So I went to Costa Rica when I was 20, thinking in whatever way I was going to save them, right? I was going to volunteer my time. We were going to build hospitals and schools, and isn't this going to be amazing? We had 2 different placements but we were the same group of people. Wow. There was Australians that came, Canadians that came, and then a handful of the local Costa Ricans, Ticos and Ticas. And when we got there, we got to choose which project we were on. Like, we got to say which one we wanted to be on. And our group ended up being all the people who said, put me wherever you want me. Because it was probably the least attractive of the groups, of the projects. But we got the best people on it. For that very reason. It was like the people were like, wherever fate wants me is where I will go. We went to this small town that was brand new, and we were trying to build a school. We didn't have the equipment, like it wasn't arrived yet. So we basically kind of did all of these odd jobs around this town. At one point we were picking up litter and people were laughing at us and throwing litter at us. And like, this town wasn't connected because they were new. And yet at the same time, there was this private waterfall, and we did finally start building a school, and the community came together and started helping with that. And then we traveled like 4 hours away. It took us an entire day to get there, to this small town where people had more of a community. They'd spent generations there, but the teenagers went away to school. The difference between just those 2 placements was huge. But learning how connected these people are and how much they have to give each other meant when I got back from Costa Rica, I went through extreme reverse culture shock. I couldn't handle Canadian culture. It's like, we're too busy. It's too chaotic. We don't understand what like true beauty and community and connection is. And so, although I was planning on going to university, one of the people I'd went to Costa Rica with had applied for med school, but had not gotten in for several years. So she was going to go to Australia. And so I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. I don't want to go to university. I'm going to go with you to Australia, where we can visit the people we had also went to Costa Rica with. And she ended up getting into med school, so she didn't go, and I went by myself to Australia. Finally, I went to a place where I do speak the language. But it was funny because I was looking for a cultural exchange. And yet what I found was like Canada culture, but the opposite. Like, we're really cold, they're really hot. We're both colonial countries. They like pushed out and have horrible history with the Aboriginal people. We have horrible history with the First Nations people. Like, I live by Whistler, where a lot of Australians come and ski, and I was like hanging out on Bondi Beach, and I don't remember what the place is, a little further south. Sorry, north. South would be southwest, a little warmer. Near where the beach is, where I hung out for a few weeks. And so I wasn't really in party mode, but I was
Byron Bay
on this like party bus and spending a lot of time by myself, but I'd kind of go in and out of, like, I'd stay with one group for a while and then continue on. And I was really like, it didn't make sense for me to go to Australia. Like I said, I was finally looking for a cultural experience, and everyone spoke English, and it was, again, I wouldn't change it for the world. I'm glad I went there at that time. While I was there, I applied to university back home and got in. And it was traveling by myself, but speaking the language. And all 3 of those experiences, I mean, I love traveling, but I don't do small traveling. I went to Germany for 3 months and came back not speaking German. I went to Costa Rica for 3 months and came back not speaking Spanish. And I tried hard to learn Spanish, and Spanish is somewhat an easier language to learn than German. Then I went to Australia, and I wasn't there to learn a new language, but I just followed animals around. I was just like, oh, kangaroos. That's what I was there to do. I went and hung out near a river for a day all by myself and stayed in this small town to find platypi, whatever the plural of that is. I saw their bubbles, but I didn't see them. And so that is my travel video. I went to Germany when I was 16. I turned 20 in Costa Rica, and I turned 21 in Australia. And I haven't really been traveling since, besides going to visit my sister in California. So that was half of my lifetime ago. So while I was in Australia, I applied to UBC, got in, and got into the Science 1 program, which is a pretty prestigious program. I possibly got into it because I was a mature student. I had taken 4 years off, so I was 21. Everyone else was like 18. I don't think I would have passed my first year and continued on if I hadn't been in Science 1, because there was a sense of camaraderie. We helped each other. So although I didn't understand physics, there was at least people on my team that would understand it and help me through it. We like did some of our tests in teams, so they helped with that part. We had open book tests, and we weren't expected to memorize and regurgitate information. We were expected to tackle hard problems like scientists should. The calculus teaching that year was a shit show because it was taught in this weird way where you weren't expected to have had it. Not every high school teaches calculus, so they couldn't expect you to have had it. But because the vast majority of students in Science 1 had learned it, they taught it in this way that was way over heads of people who hadn't learned it, like myself, and way under the heads of people who had, is that a thing? It was too easy for people who had already learned it. But the intertwining of having these 70 students learn biology and chemistry and physics and math together in the same room and be able expected to tackle problems was amazing. Then I went on to second year, where everything was regurgitation. Everything was memorize it and regurgitate it on a test. And because of how Science 1, all those people went on to physics and chemistry and biology, there was always at least 1 or 2 people from Science 1 in your class. And so you had like a ready-made study group. You also had a ready-made place to go and have a study group because you just went and hung out at the old Science 1 classroom with the new Science 1 kids. I got to experience like the politics of science and understand more of like who gets into medical school. Not people I want to trust, just the people who know how to fake their grades and know how to like get on student council and then never participate in it, just so they can put that on their resume. I ended up working in a laboratory and getting paid, partly because from the Science 1 experience. And that experience was amazing because we would sit in on lab meetings and we were treated like we were members of the lab, even though we were undergrad students. We got to troubleshoot the experiment, run the experiment, help design it. It was a point where we were, I think, going to have our names on the published article, but I don't think we ended up having them on there because we were undergrad students. I also got diagnosed with brain tumors when I was in university, which will be its own video. I ended up taking an integrated science degree, which is an option when you are in university. I took a minor in economics, but you can't have a minor and an integrated science degree, so I don't actually have a minor in economics, but I took enough courses to have what would be a minor. Integrated science degree meant I didn't have to follow the usual path. I got to pick and choose the courses that I wanted. And the sciences I wanted to integrate were genetics, the super small, how does our DNA dictate our lives, and ecology, how does the big system work? And for me, that was very intuitive. I'm like, of course the genetics interplays, and I need economics to use it in the actual world. And economics and ecology are actually very intertwined with the formulas that are in both of them. Exponential growth, and there's a lot of similarities. But the fact that like they couldn't see the genetics and ecology were natural to integrate and I could was also eye-opener. They're like, no, what we mean is chemistry and biology. You need to take like 2 unrelated fields that we can see the relative to. We can see how you bring chemistry into biology. There is biological chemistry. That is a field. It's probably not called that exact word. I can't think of the exact word, but I think biochemistry, it's called biochemistry. All of my university experience I'm so happy I had it. I don't think it was worth the $40,000 I paid for it. Because what I learned wasn't necessarily in the textbooks. It was like learning everything you don't know, learning that even after you have an undergrad degree, even after you're passionate about something, you kind of have to go on to do a master's and a PhD, both to work in it, but also to truly feel like you have something to offer. You have to tackle a problem, and the two places in science are either laboratory or field. And I knew the lab work wasn't quite for me. I couldn't see myself doing that as a career, coming in at 7 a.m., like coming in all night, like pipette petri dishes, and it was spending months and months to come up with the eureka moment, and then maybe not because the experiment failed. There wasn't quite enough payoff for me to be in that, and I was in school to become like the Jane Goodall of elephants, and I realized I don't actually want to be outside following elephants around. It was like the romantic idea of what I was going to do versus the actual idea, and I think getting brain tumors during it as well changed my brain. Changing during taking university was a big thing. And so I went to university. I got a degree. It's in ecology and genetics with a minors in economics. So when I was in my third year of university, I was seeing double for weeks. I was in my courses, these big like 300 people courses, like with one eye, trying to see the board at the front. And eventually I went to my family doctor because when I Googled the symptoms in my laboratory, it said brain tumor. I was like, I might have a brain tumor. And I went to my doctor and she diagnosed me with dehydration. I came back feeling silly. I was like, it is deadly if it's not treated, but drank Gatorade for a few weeks and it didn't go away. And so I finally went to the emergency room and basically made them give me a CAT scan. They acted like I was ripping off the system. I'm ridiculous. I'm a 25-year-old, of course, like what could it be? But another doctor told me if I felt nauseous, I needed to go in and get a CAT scan. So I was like, no, he said, I'm here. Give me the CAT scan. And they did under duress and came back that I had a brain tumor. They were like, how's your hearing? I didn't even know I had trouble hearing. I only had 30% of hearing left in the ear that it was affecting. So it was about 2 months between being diagnosed and going under the knife, having my actual surgery, which is like a 12-hour process. It was a very profound experience getting diagnosed with brain tumors, both because of the community support, the amount of like my friends in the laboratory and in school, and my old friends from Starbucks who like surrounded me with love and connection and came to visit me in the hospital after it and invited me out to do things, and I was more likely to say yes and go out and do things because I didn't know. I mean, when you're 25 and here you're having brain surgery, you think death or permanent dismemberment, and like the worst thing I could think of was losing my hair and not being able to smile and having half my face not work, which is one of the common symptoms having had this surgery. It's an acoustic neuroma. And so then coming out of the surgery, I was deaf in one ear. My double vision recorrected itself the other way, so I had worse double vision after. But my brain was relearning how to fill in those holes, so it wasn't going to stay that way. I had to relearn balance, but it got worse because my brain swelled. They took me off of steroids, and I ended up acting like a 2-year-old, which becoming a parent gave me a lot of insight. But at the time, it really was hard. It was hard to feel like the world is attacking me with light and sound, and yet I can't even communicate my needs, and people needing me to communicate my needs repeatedly. The doctors, both that they took me off of steroids when they weren't supposed to, even though it made sense medically, but also going to my family doctor in a state of my brain swelling and her not recognizing it, just kind of calling and getting new painkillers. And so there were extra days that I had my brain swelling and damaged. I had to be readmitted to the hospital. I had a spinal tap. I ended up staying with my boss from the laboratory. My dad came in and he had to take time off of work and come and watch me during the day while she was at work. I remember walking to go vote. That's how much I vote in every election. Well, like I could barely walk and it was a hard time learning how to have a new brain. And this was actually just sensory stuff. It was just having like the not being able to walk and the not being able to tell direction of sound and not being able to cancel out background noise, and how much of a drastic impact that had on my life. Going to parties and not being able to cancel it out and being so exhausted at the end of every day, even without a lot of background noise, just feeling tired, extremely tired. But the university accommodated my needs while I was in the process of getting brain tumors, and I had an extra like year. It took me about 5 years to do the 4 year degree because I had an economics class that I took the final later, and I had some other courses that I didn't finish, and I was kind of allowed to do some coursework and not other coursework. And that those brain tumors changed my life. Then that was in 2005 when I was 25. Then in 2010, the brain tumors grew back or were growing back. And so I could keep getting surgery, which is like 12 hours long, or I could get radiation. And I really didn't want to have radiation, but it was the only option. And as much as the brain swelling changed my brain, radiation changed it so much more. When you go through radiation, you're expected to have symptoms, but they're supposed to go away. And mine never really did. I became very sensitive to smells, and that stayed. I was nauseous constantly. And my brain still continues to change to this day. It's not medically explainable. Supposedly, after you've had radiation on your brain, you're supposed to just get better and you're fine. And mine didn't seem to. I'm at an increased risk for strokes. I'm not able to learn things in the same way I did before. That all happened. So in between those, in that 5 years, I graduated from university. I worked at Van City for a while and learned finance, went to school actually to take financial planning and did well in that. Became a government worker, was the top of my class, could understand that stuff, no problem. Then I underwent radiation and I had to do level 2, and I just like couldn't get it. I couldn't understand. I can't read and retain information the same way. And while they did the preliminary work for the radiation, they found I had another tumor at the top of my head. And this is part of my reading into things, maybe, but I was like, okay, so I'm not listening. I got a tumor on my hearing nerve. I'm not listening. And then I didn't listen to whatever lesson life was there to teach me. And so it gave me like a second one on my crown chakra that was like, you're not listening. Oh, to your higher power. You're not listening to your higher power. And so I had surgery in 2010. No, sorry. I had surgery in 2005, radiation in 2010, and then another surgery in 2015. My daughter was already alive. She was 2.5. My mom had to come and watch her, and I had to start breastfeeding her because I was going to be on medication. And now that it's 2020, I'm like, okay, this is the year I'm not going to have brain shit done. Not that brain shit. And so that's my brain tumor story, which isn't quite the changing of my brain, which is my neurodiversity. And I'm going to do a second video at one point to explain that in particular. But brain tumors, they have been a really hard part of my life. And like every piece of this story, I wouldn't change it for the world because it's led me exactly where I am and exactly what I'm here to do. I was in a long-term relationship, and it became apparent that I was depressed because I wasn't a mom, and he was on the fence of having children. He didn't want to bring another human being into this world. He didn't know if he was going to be a good dad. And so we broke up. He went on to move in with a roommate who became his wife, and they are amazingly compatible in a way that him and I aren't. And I went on to give birth to my soulmate, the person on this planet that is here to teach me, here to be me in exactly the right ways, and so not me in exactly the right ways. I could not have planned her better. If this was Gattaca and I got to design a child, I would have broken my life. She is exactly who she is supposed to be to teach me every lesson I'm here to learn. She is physically like a little mini me, and I could see her beauty so obviously. She's gorgeous. And so I couldn't look at her curly hair and freckles and not love mine. I can't see her attitude and stubbornness and not clearly see it as a reflection of mine. And when we butt heads, it's like even in the moment I can see that. I'm like, damn it, why? Can't you listen to me? I'm the parent. And I got a child who in no way respects authority. I'm like, of course you don't respect authority. Which gene was that? I should have canceled that one out. She has taught me emotional intelligence in a way I never had access to it, but I had enough self awareness to know I didn't have access to it. So I couldn't teach it to her. I could only allow it to emerge. And in allowing it to emerge when she was little and throw a tantrum in the middle of public, I would just be present with her. I'm here for you. We'll get through this. And she taught me that going through the storm, there's peace on the other end that doesn't exist when you shove those emotions down. She had made me fall back in love with femininity that I never loved it. I hated the color pink until she fell in love with the color pink. She is an artist, creative, loves to dance, loves to be on stage, is an extrovert to like the nth degree, needs to say hi to everyone, pet every puppy, have a conversation with everybody. And I'm just present for her in that. She can have the interactions with people, even if it makes me uncomfortable. Like, I don't have the interactions with people. I have to have my boundary. I won't sit there and stand there and talk to strangers, but I will be present while she's talking to them. We, taught her proper dog etiquette. You have to ask before you pet them, find out if they're friendly. If they say no, there's a reason, and how to put her hands out, how to read dog language. But because dogs I'm good with, but you, as an adult, you can't pet someone's dog without interacting with them. Neither can she, but if I could interact with the dogs and not the people, I probably would. And she's made me step outside of my comfort zone in my introversion so that she could have extroversion. To like, okay, we'll have to make a play date with friends because that's what you need. Got it. Even if that's not within my comfort zone, that's okay. I will push myself for you. Of course, you're my child. But also, I had to learn with where I was on my health journey and giving birth and that whole story, which is a story in and of itself. I had to learn how to put my oxygen mask on first. That even at she being my number one priority, I won't be there for her whole life if I don't take care of myself. If I don't figure out, if I want her to live from her heart and be who she truly is and let herself emerge, I also have to do that. I can't be conforming and doing the things and showing her a bad example, what I felt was a bad example. So we're only, I guess, 8 years into our parenting journey because it kind of starts when you become pregnant. And I was pregnant almost 8 years ago. And parenthood has taught me that I can't hold stringently to this view of how things are going to be. Birth taught me that. I had a birth plan that went freaking haywire. I don't think anything I had planned followed through because life and my kid have their own plan, and our interwoven lives, what she brings to my life, her perspective, the things she comes up with. I could not be more in love with another human being. And she taught me that. She taught me what love really truly is. That it's not angels singing from on high. You never get pissed off by someone. It's the opposite. She can trigger me all day long. She can yell, "I hate you," in my face. And I'm never going to lose an ounce of love for her. I have enough respect for my parenting journey that I understand that other people aren't meant to be on it. That both our actual parenting journey, like they're not meant to be in my life because they don't like how I'm parenting her. But also just there's people who choose to not be parents and they're here to learn other things. I don't think this is for everyone. But this person, this position of being a mom to this human being is exactly what I'm here to do. And she is what, like, this world needs her as herself. Not because she's better than anyone, but because she's the best person at being her. She's the only one who can be her. And that comes with having me as her mom, with having a family of two. And that I allow her to unfold and I get to be along for that journey. And I'm on my own journey during that same time period. So this was a little bit about my parenting journey. I couldn't ever do it justice in under 5 minutes. Clearly, it's close to 7. I couldn't do this justice talking about it for years, but it is continuing to unfold, and I'll be continuing to share it. Thank you. One of no camera. Just had a pause to mention, and I showcased this is what posted, so I recorded it before they posted, but February 19th, 2020, which is the day that Kyle Cease got Me Too'd by an Allison, the day that Caitlin Me Too'd a photographer, the day this got posted, and I have February 19th things with my family on either side. And it's also the anniversary, 2014, I believe was, so 2020 be the 6-year anniversary of Tim Ballard going and doing one of the rescue missions that got him one of his children, which I didn't find out about. And yeah, that whole, it's in the video for February 19th on this channel. But also, sorry, not just the February 19th. I also, because it's 2020, February, I am no longer part of this community. I lost this community because of the pandemic. And I lost everything I set up that worked for me and my life. The school, all of it got lost. Of the amazing aspects of my life is this community that I am part of. I have been involved since the beginning. The beginning of my child is very intertwined in this community, at least in my mind, because one of the first workshops of us planning this community is right around the time that my child was conceived. And getting to watch this community come together as people joined it, as decisions were made, as the bureaucracy would stall it, and we'd have to figure out how to deal with internal conflict and external conflict. And it had shaped my worldview. It has helped me think of ways that everybody can have access to this level of community. I, as a single parent, living below the poverty line with a lot of health challenges, I get to participate in a community that means that those things have less of an impact on my child. That I get a lot of amazing food for way less than if I made it by myself. Definitely way less energy than if I made it by myself. My kid gets connection and community when I'm not capable of it, when I can just like zone out and be in freeze mode, and she can be running around with other kids, being as loud as they want in the playroom, learning her own interpersonal conflict strategies with other kids, and going to the parents when need be. That I know other parents, although we all have different parenting style, all of them are compassionate, wonderful people who I trust to discipline my kid in the moment, right? Oh, maybe don't do that. That's not safe. Don't do that. Do that. And often to do it in a better way than I can even do it, especially in those moments when I'm not capable because it's loud and chaotic around me. Get to eat these amazing meals, get to participate. There's aspects that, like, they have a yoga room that I have access to, that if I wanted to, I could go up and do yoga in a private studio 3 times a week or more, but I only go there 3 times a week. Because they share that space, right? For each of them to have their own yoga studio would be ridiculous. But the fact that they get to share in that means that, middle class families have what upper class families would have access to. They all have access to 2 guest rooms that they share, access to a kitchen that they can host larger extended family gatherings in, and then clean up there and not have to bring it back to their house, right? Not have to clean up their house beforehand. That they share in childcare. They share in, like, my kid just had this amazing birthday thanks to community, just because like one of my friends got us tickets to the aquarium, not who lives in the community. And because I got the tickets to the aquarium, one of the moms covered the cost of food at the cafe. And so it was basically like I paid for some souvenir photos. So like my kid had her 7th birthday at the Vancouver Aquarium for like under $50. Very impromptu because it's supposed to be just a small gathering. But when you have a small gathering in community and then a few kids join, it ends up like it was 5 kids and a day at the aquarium, and that was perfect. Those kind of things, like last Valentine's Day, there was this amazing fondue for the kids. We ended up walking home in a snowstorm because the buses weren't running. But the kind of thing that I don't have the energy or the creativity in that facet to put on. And we, karaoke events and things where they had like these mocktails that like were the different um, rainbow levels, right, based on the density of the liquid that they made for the kids. They were mocktails, non-alcoholic, but beautiful. And going camping, but not having to. I can't go camping just the two of us. It's too much work, too much executive functioning. But going camping with this group, where someone brings a kayak and someone else is singing around the campfire. The odd time I get to go and house sit for somebody there, which is amazing because it's we're like the one person who can go and house sit and be part of the community. Anyone else that's there isn't, like, kids are in and out of our house constantly, whichever house we're staying at, because that's how life works there. They, like, your kid is within this somewhat enclosed, safe community. Not somewhat, it is enclosed and safe. They could get out if they wanted to, but people can't get in. And like finding your kid and they don't want to be found can be a little bit difficult between these. Like, you have to go knock on everyone's door. Is my kid here? Is my kid here? It's what everyone should have access to. And yet, if you didn't want to live there, it's kind of torture. There's a few. This is one of the conversations I was having last night when we were on a cleanup team together, was how well families work in this community, because you can have introverts and extroverts. If you're an introvert, you can hang out in your house most of the time and not go out. You can go out and get social interaction when you need it or want it. And even when you're not, like, my kid can go and get social interaction. In fact, it's the one place where when we stay there, my kid gets overly socialized. Like, she gets beyond her socialization point as an extrovert and needs to kind of have some downtime. Normally in her life, it's way under that level because we exist at home, the two of us, and we have to like go out to the park and get that social interaction. Community adds so much. It adds actual resources for way less money. Everyone has a much lower social impact there. Like, we're going out this weekend. One of the people's the designated driver because she doesn't drink, but she's using one of the other women's cars because she has a 7-seater car. We brought our kids to sleepaway camp during the summer, and it was 3 of our kids going, the 3 moms all driving, and we all got to fit in the same vehicle, including one of the little sisters who wasn't going. And like those kind of things just pop up constantly, and I'm just so grateful to have these people in my life and get to see the impact of community. And I want everyone to have access. And how do we create that? We're going to figure it out. But also, creating intentional communities from the ground up, not creating them for profit and creating them for purpose instead. But this is my video on my community. Thank you. All right, so this is. I don't remember what I paused to say. But something. I'll interrupt my queerness story when it comes through. Is my queerness video. Coming into grips with the fact I'm queer, or learning, uncovering it in my own personality. I was in. I recorded these and then had them set to upload. So the one for community uploaded on February 19th. on February 17th, in community, house sitting is when I had the second anger event. And February 19th, the previous year, is when I had the anger event with my sister. And in a year from this, or 19th, is when I send her a different email about Enneagram. There were other things that happened while this was going on that I wanted to mention that were big, but they're not coming to my mind right now. But they were in the, that when the lottery got the ticket, had the Valentine's Day, and the Valentine's Day I referred to previously, where we walk home in the snow, was part of the catalyst of the event with my sister on the February 19th email. So, that they're intertwined, and that I won the lottery while these were all uploading, while I was telling my story. Interesting. I mean, it, wasn't life-changing amount, but it was a pay attention amount. This school, which was like a business school for hippies, how to start a social enterprise, and we met a few times a week. It was the first time I'd had people surrounding me who truly understood what it was. Like, I felt like I could show up, have a disability, and not be seen as less than. That I was figuring out my identity, but I was figuring out my identity in that piece. And it was the first time I encountered people who identified as something other than the binary genders. And it broke my brain, both because I'm sorry, that's one of the other people's birthdays. That today is three people's birthdays. One of the people I had a crush on in Grotswell is one of the other birthdays for today. I love how I'm watching these today, and that's coming up. And the third person was also relevant, but I'm not going to mention what. Grammatically, I had a really hard time getting my mind around they, them pronouns. Not wanting to accept it, but just grammatically, I was like, I don't understand where I use it, and I don't understand. I was translating constantly from he, I mean they, she, I mean they, and they had to kind of put up with it for that period of my life, because that was what I was capable of in the moment, and I tried my hardest, but my hardest was constantly failing at it. And then I had friends who who were in the same class as me, who after the class ended up changing their pronouns to they, them, and that was even more difficult because I'd known them as different ones, and so I messed up even more with their pronouns, and they were even more gracious about it, so I'm very grateful for that. But there was something, it wasn't just the pronouns, which was a grammatical thing and just a language, and I have difficulty with language, but it was encountering people who were non-binary for the first time made me question how differently I treat the binary. I didn't know which box to put them in. I didn't know whether they were men and I should treat them as men, or they were women and I should treat them as women. And it made me uncomfortable to think that was even the case. Like, wait, do I really treat men and women that differently? Yes, I do, especially as a heterosexual female that I identified with at the time. So that was like the beginning of my, what I've lovingly referred to as the gender fuck, of going into this space of like, wait, how much of me resonates with this gender, and realizing that for trans women in particular, there was something about the fact that somebody could be labeled as male, have the body that is labeled as male, and reside, yet identify so strongly with being a woman. They're like, I don't fucking care what you think, I'm a woman. And I never felt that strongly. There was, the only reason I felt I was a woman is because I had the body. I'm like, I got the parts. I'm a woman. Check that box. And so I had no problem with allowing trans women into the womanhood, because I was like, if you feel that strongly that you're willing to check that box, I don't even feel that strongly I'm willing to check that box. And that was more important. It was like the inner being. I was like, I have none of that. And so it also made me question, looking back, like how much of who I am is trying to be a woman, thinking I should be feminine, to attract a man, think I should be these things that I don't feel, feeling like I'm failing at being a woman. And like, it just made me question everything. And it was the beginning of accepting who I am, not caring whether I'm feminine or masculine, not caring which box I check, just being. And I probably would identify as non-binary. I do identify as non-binary in gender. I identify as a female that is non-binary, and but I go by she, her because the pronouns break my brain. So I will honor it for other people, but for me, I'm like, no, she, her. It just works better for who I am. I don't know what to say. But there was 4 minutes in. I'm not going to get to the other. I guess this is just gender. And so there'll be queer part 1 and queer part 2. So yeah. And I also know how tumultuous and hard this journey was internally for me, that I get why people aren't willing to go on the gender journey, that it hurts them at a soul level. It breaks their brain to have other people walking around non-binary because they don't know which box to put them in. And they probably don't even know how to articulate that. There's just like this wrongness about it. And we have to be able to hold that tension of like, both of those things is true. We have to, as a society, go through the gender fuck. And it's a hard thing to do, and we cannot require it of other people, both simultaneously. And so everyone kind of has to do it in their own time, is the conclusions I have come to. And they're not the true conclusions, they're my conclusions. And so this is part 1 of queerness. Thank you. All right, so this is queerness part 2. Part of what happened when I encountered people that were non-binary, especially, this is my language, females that are non-binary, was that there was this, I was attracted to them. It's, put it bluntly, I was definitely attracted to them. And I didn't know whether it was because I wanted to be them or I wanted to be with them. And it became to the point where it doesn't matter. It's both of those things. It can be both. But I had to break from this heteronormative that masculine matches with feminine. And I realized how much of my life as a heterosexual woman, I was trying to be something to attract a heterosexual man. And when I came to the realization I was queer and attracted to different genders, I gave that up. I was like, I'm not going to be anything besides who I am. And whoever that attracts, great. And whoever it doesn't, whoever it turns off, even better. I love my coming out story to myself because I don't live in closets. I can't do closets. So once I know I'm something, everybody knows I'm something. Once I knew I was autistic, everyone knows I'm autistic. Once I was queer, everyone knows I'm queer. But I was watching Orange is the New Black. And there was this really beautiful romantic scene between 2 of the women in it. And I was like, oh, when do I get to go to prison and have a girlfriend? I was like, you are allowed to have a girlfriend and not go to prison. Like, that's about the queerest thought someone could have. You're queer. And then I was out. I was out to myself, and I eventually came out to my family. Not eventually, just like the next time I talked to them, I was basically like, remember when I came out? They're like, you haven't. When are you telling? I was like, oh, well, right now, I guess. Right now. My siblings kind of already knew I was gay before I did, which probably made it last longer me not knowing, because it was like this, no, I'm not. What do you mean? No, I'm not. Aspect to it. But it also, I had been critical of one of my family members who came out later in life because he's kind of asexual, and I was like, yeah, okay, so now you're gonna not date men, like you don't date women. I had a roommate at one point in time who was both poly and asexual, and I was like, you can't be both of those things. And this is where my karma always comes into play, because whenever I'm critical of someone else, like, it becomes my life. And so I am both came out as queer late in like mid 30s, and I am both demisexual, which is on the asexual spectrum, and I think I'm a bit poly too. And I have not in any way actually, like, physically in the real world explored those things because of my disability and being a single mom. I've keep to myself. Like, there isn't enough of an incentive as a demisexual to go out. I'm perfectly happy being single. and I would love a partner. Both of those things are simultaneously my body, and I am kind of non-binary gendered with like the masculine feminine. I'm like, I'm neither, I'm both. I don't know. Ask me on the day. I'm me. And I'm attracted to people who are also non-binary, mainly, and then also masculine. And I'm not really attracted to the feminine, but sometimes I am. Sometimes it's just like who shows up and it's their energy. There's a handful of people who are feminine. I'm like, I love you. You're so awesome. And not in a way that I love my friends who are also awesome. And it's just that. It's just like in the moment, not needing it to be anything, because I came from a very strong, like, this is how it is. These are the rules. In fact, there were rules that because I wasn't that, I couldn't be gay. Because yet I didn't have those same rules for my heterosexuality, and they applied to both. I was like, oh, wait, no, no, that doesn't make any sense. And so I both identify as queer, and I have never kissed a girl. And I don't know if I will. I don't know if I need to get healthy again, if I need to not have that be stressful in order to do it. I'm just taking it as it goes and enjoying, as I explained when I came out, like, my imaginary boyfriend has been replaced by an imaginary girlfriend or an imaginary partner. Like, that's just how it goes. And that was part of what I was critical about with other people. It's I'm like, you can't be queer if you haven't actually done this stuff. Come on. Like, no, it's an inner world. If I was on a deserted island and came to these realizations, it wouldn't make it less real. And I'm a little bit on a deserted island in my own life at the moment. Online dating doesn't work for me. Imagine online dating that would work. And so when we create that, I might use it. And until then, I'm kind of good. I'm good being me and exploring it as it comes and not forcing it. But this was part 2 of queerness. Thanks. So, less than a year ago, I diagnosed myself with autism in spring 2019. And so, this is that story and a bit of the magic that makes me autistic. So, a couple years before that, in I'd say 2017, I got undiagnosed with ADD by my doctor at the time, who said I wasn't able to get the meds unless I was re-diagnosed as an adult. So I went through the process, which is weird because I felt like she had taken away a piece of my identity. I didn't really care necessarily about the meds, but it was like, you can't be autistic, or sorry, you can't be ADD unless you are characterized as that. And I knew my whole life I was ADD. It's my brain that I've lived in and dealt with my whole life. And so, in getting re-diagnosed with ADD, which did end up happening, I ended up mistakenly taking a questionnaire on autism. And without knowing that, it was very clear I was whatever this questionnaire was telling me I was. And then at the top was like, oh, it's autism. That's why it's not the same. That there was just qualities that I did not associate with ADD. And so in so doing, it gave me the inkling, the like little spark of like, maybe you're autistic. The straw that broke the camel's back, the thing that pushed it over the edge, was somebody who tweeted out a list of maybe you're autistic if. And there were so much, it just resonated with me on this deep down level that I was in tears. And I was like, these are my people. This is what I've been dealing with my whole life. It's not just ADD. And it's also not just my brain changes, what would be known as brain damage from my brain tumors and resulting treatments. It is something that now looking back, I can see my whole life. My sensory issues when I was a child, my being overly emotional as a child, needing to turn it off, being able to feel other people's emotions, which is more of an empath thing, but a lot of autistic people also have that part of it. It's like feeling other people's emotions and not being able to make sense of them, not being able to name your own emotions, feeling like clothes. If clothes were itchy or scratchy, they were never worn again. I didn't care how much money I spent on them. If shoes gave me a blister one time, they were never getting worn again. And now that I can embrace that and not feel like I'm a broken female because I'm not into fashion, like, right, comfort. Comfort always trumps fashion for me. It just always is. Not for my kid though. She still needs it to be comfortable, but she also wants it to be beautiful and cute. I don't. Like I am who I am. My sensory stuff did get worse after my brain tumors, but I always had it. I remember wanting to like stab my brother with a fork when he would chew with his mouth open at breakfast. And I was not. I was like a very happy, bubbly child. But the sensory stuff would make me go off. I would have a tantrum well into my teenage years if I had to wash the dishes and there was peanut butter in it. I didn't know how to verbally communicate that. It was just like, well, you're being a baby. Like, stop. It's not a big deal. Everyone else is doing it. You just don't want to. I can look back now with hindsight and see how I've had special interests come and go for my life, but two of mine that I've had my entire life that are also, they're both more socially acceptable than a lot of what other people's special interests are. But I've had this urge to learn about human atrocity, the things that humans have done to each other throughout history, as well as the beauty, the environmental catastrophes, the animal suffering, the genocides and wars. And that's less socially acceptable to bring up, but because it's intertwined with everything else, it is somewhat socially acceptable and more socially acceptable now. Like, you still shouldn't probably bring up, these type of things that bring the mood down. And one of my masks is laughing all the time, and I don't even know how to not do that one. That one I don't know how to unmask, and maybe I will at some point in time. And there are moments when I can, but I think it helps me learn about the atrocities because it has an actual neurological effect on my body to be in a happy mood almost all of the time. And so I was able to learn about these things that depress other people. And yet underlining, I think that's where a lot of my chronic health issues come from, is knowing about all these things and feeling alone in that knowledge, that like people just don't want to hear about it. They don't want to know. They don't want to solve it. And I get why, because it's overwhelming. And then the other special interest is me, is like, who am I? How do I fit into the world? And through that, how do other people fit into the world? How do things work for other people? What makes me unique and different, and what makes me the same? And now that it's coming more from a place of curiosity rather than, I don't know, feeling broken because I was different in some way, there is a power there. And every time I've learned about new traits that autistic people have, well, they're not new traits, but they're new to me. Oppositional defiance disorder, which I think is maybe called something else now. But I'm like, yeah, right. And someone tells me to do something, I want to do the exact opposite. I can now own that and be like, no, listen to your own internal guide. Don't not do something because someone tells you to, but also don't do something because somebody tells you to. That more and more autistic people, there's a higher per capita percent of people who are queer and asexual in the autistic community. And those are things that I definitely am. So I am going to end this here because I really need to cough and I don't want to cough on camera. And we're at the 6-minute mark. So this is a bit of my autistic journey, which is interwoven with everything else. Thank you. I used to be a much more judgmental person than I currently am. A big reason I used to be and am no longer judgmental is I have this weird, what I call like reverse karma, or when I'm judgmental about something, it shows up in my life. And with both of my parents, the thing I was most judgmental about them with are exactly what I inherited from them. Even with friends and roommates, the things that I was like, that can't be a thing, are things that showed up in my own life. As a parent, and I think this is where it happens in many people's lives, before you're a parent, you have this idea of exactly how you're going to raise your kid, right? My kid's never going to misbehave in public. And for me, it was my kid, one, my birth was going to go. I was going to have a natural birth at home. I was going to breastfeed. And my kid was never going to have sugar or have screen time. I ended up with a C-section in the hospital. I had to formula feed for a while. And because, life has its own agenda. My kid absolutely has screen time all of the time and eats sugar daily. And now, like, I can see why. Like, right, because this is easier because our culture is so intertwined with these things. My parents, two of the main the things I was judgmental on was when I was a teenager, my mom had, I think for the first time, although maybe it interplayed with the rest of her life as well, chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. And watching my mom kind of not having it during our childhood and then having it, I was like, right, no, you're depressed. Get off the couch. Get off the couch. And now that my daughter is born and I had high stress trigger mine, I absolutely am like, oh, now I get it. Yes, chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, your whole body's in pain, your whole body is exhausted, and there's no explanation for it. There are little things you can do to improve it, but nothing greatly. My dad, when he was in his late 30s, came out as bisexual. He, I had known him as, my mom and dad were together um, until I was 15, and then they split up. But my dad doesn't date. So, like, my judgmental side was like, oh, good. So now you're going to not date men the same way you don't date women. Like, this is sure you can be bisexual and not and be asexual, more or less. And that is who I am. Like, I didn't realize I was queer until my late 30s. I haven't kissed a woman because of my health conditions and my demisexual, which is on the asexual spectrum. And so I'm like, but it's from inside. It's not something that someone else labels you as or society puts on you. I had a roommate who was both poly and asexual. I was like, that can't be a thing. Those are opposite sides of a spectrum. And now I kind of am both of those things. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to have just one partner. If I was going to have partners, I don't know. And yet I don't know if I have the capacity to have more than even one, let alone more than one. And so now it's funny when I hear other people who aren't parents who are judgmental about parents. I'm like, shh, don't say it. It's going to be, if you're going to be a parent, you're going to get the thing. Don't say it. But I don't know if everyone has this happen in their lives constantly. It happens for me. And now that enough of them have happened, I'm grateful for it. Because now in the moment when I'm judgmental about someone, I go, no, stop being judgmental. One, you don't know. You're not in their shoes. And I can also see it as what it was, which is like their thing would trigger this subconscious knowledge of what I am, but not accepting in myself. And so I am both very grateful for my judgmental self, and it has greatly evaporated. There's very few things I'm judgmental for people on. The one probably being like, I don't know, like what is currently propped up in society. So capitalistic, rich, you think you're entitled to everything just because you have money. I am still judgmental about that. And dear goodness, if I'm looking forward to having to experience that on the other side. Oh, look, now I'm rich. Let's see if I'm still that person. I don't think I will be, because that judgment comes from a different place. That's unfairness on a grand scale. And I don't think that you've earned it, because nobody earns it. None of us are more entitled to love and connection and resources and health and community than anybody else. You're entitled to someone's community. Like, you can't force people to be friends with you, but you're not entitled to, having better healthcare, getting first in line of organs, getting first in line at the coffee shop that, people I know who are a little narcissistic and rich. It's like, the more narcissistic you are, the easier it is to get rich. And then the more you feel that you're entitled to being rich because you got rich and you tried hard to do it. Anyway, so look at that. So there comes out my judgment. It's not like I'm at zero. I haven't zenned out in all of my judgment. But this character trait has been a blessing. Thank you. So this video is about my disabilities, my health challenges, and how they intersect. The intersectionality of my disabilities. I feel that almost every one of the traits that I have is rather low on the spectrum of that trait. I have single-sided deafness, but I don't have tinnitus with it. I still have rather perfect hearing in my other ear, which is both a blessing and a curse. If you're single-sided deaf, you can understand. But there's the statistic that I read was 30% of people become single-sided deaf in their adult life. Go on to not be able to work. And I get that, because it is very difficult to be in a binary hearing world when you're single-sided, because you can't cancel out background noise, and it's just exhausting to live in the regular world. So the world is exhausting for me. and I have chronic fatigue. And what chronic fatigue is, for some people, it's devastating. They cannot get out of bed. They cannot do absolutely anything. Like a walk to the washroom is all they can do in a day. Some can't even do that. Mine is less than that. As long as I don't do cardio, as long as my heart rate doesn't get up, I seem to do okay. But my body doesn't recover from, which is a sign of chronic fatigue, that your body doesn't restore itself with sleep. So I restore myself a little bit with sleep, but nowhere near what someone without chronic fatigue does, and yet not anywhere near as bad as what somebody with very devastating chronic fatigue has. I have fibromyalgia, which is chronic pain that's kind of unexplained all throughout my body, but there are things that I can do that cause no pain. I don't walk like I'm in pain because it doesn't help to walk any differently. It's just different if I like hurt my ankle or hurt my knee, then I need to walk on it more softly. I have arthritis, which is when you get in a pain cycle, your body starts creating more pain. So it's kind of hard to deal with the neurological, mental part of fibromyalgia. Well, I also have arthritis, but I'm figuring it out and I'm dealing with it. I have sensory processing disorder, which I have been diagnosed with, which is a subset of autism. Like it's under the autism umbrella, but not when I got diagnosed with it. So sounds can trigger me, lights can trigger me, smells can trigger me, and it puts me into fight, flight, or freeze mode. Generally freeze, generally, but sometimes fight or flight. Like I need to get away from it. So actually, flight is one. So I feel like I'm definitely missing more of my diagnoses. Anxiety, which is also kind of a lot of people who end up figuring out they have autism have had anxiety their whole lives, probably because you feel like you don't fit in and you need to figure out how to fit in so you get some amount of social interaction, because you still, at least I still have that need. That the single-sided deafness makes me tired. The chronic fatigue means that I can't recuperate as well. The fibromyalgia and arthritis means my body's in pain, which uses more energy. And so as long as I deal with my spoons, which is a metric for energy that has developed within the energy disability community, that as long as I can budget my spoons, I do okay. But as soon as I've had one bad day, it can lead into the next and lead into the next, and it's really hard to recover from. So I have to make sure that I keep myself warm so that I'm not using extra energy to do things like that. I have to make sure, and there's a lot of things that are, what am I like? It's finding the balance. If my house is clean, my anxiety is doing better. My everything's better, right? It's easier to move around, takes less energy to move around a clean house. But cleaning my house takes energy, so it's almost always going to get messy eventually because I'm going to have a bad day and I'm not going to have spoons and it's going to end. And I have ADD, like, and so I have a hard time keeping my house clean, and yet the opposite affects me. If I was to eat very healthy, it would probably lessen a lot of my symptoms. But I don't have the energy to eat healthy or the executive functioning to do it, so I don't. And that was actually one of the biggest jumps in my health, was letting go of this rigid, what is healthy and what's not. Now I've got to go back the other way and figure out how to eat healthy within my capacity of spoons and executive functioning, and I will. Feel like I'm going to get off of this and totally remember something that is, my neurological stuff. So since my radiation, my brain's just weird. Like it'll hold on to sensations for a really long time. Like if I'm nauseous, it will continually be nauseous for weeks. But then sometimes it won't. It's like I have a cough right now. And when I've had a cough in the past, it's like it becomes Tourette's. Like I don't have Tourette's, but it becomes like this neurological pathway that it will just keep following until it lets it go. And I also just have weird neurological sensations. I'll smell things that aren't there, or I will feel things on my body that I know aren't there. But since I know they're not there, I'm fine. And every once in a while, like I'll feel something crawling on me and I'll go to like itch it or get it off. It'll be like an actual thing, and that'll definitely freak me out because I'm so used to it not being something. So I have a lot of different conditions. I have changed the story from, oh, woe is me, who am I, why do I have all these things, to, well, one, I don't have them all, none of them are terrible, by themselves. It's only the intersectionality of them that makes it so I can't work and makes it so that my life is reduced. And that they truly are a blessing because they've let me see into people's lives that have all of these things much more strongly, and they have much more of a devastating impact. So I can create a world that works for everyone. If I didn't have these limitations, I wouldn't have as much empathy. I wouldn't have as much understanding for misunderstanding what other people are going through. Like, I'm like, right, I get that you don't experience life in my body. I get what this looks like from the outside versus inside. And if I can't go by your judgment of my life, I can't judge your life either. And so I look at my all of my disabilities as a blessing because they are part of what I'm here to do. They've also helped me get over, I would say, 90% of my ableism. There's still some ableism in there, but it's what I'm here to do, and the intersectionality of them is what helps. Thanks. All right, this is my story, the part of my story that's about my neurodiversity, which for me encompasses three main things: my ADD, my autism, and my brain damage, which I call my brain change. I have known I've had ADD my whole life, and I've dealt with it. I got through high school with high grades. I went to university and graduated because part of ADD is kind of waiting for this adrenaline to kick in, and then being able, for me anyway, and then being able to put all this information in my head. And complex logical systems seem to stick more easily, but I was never able to study, to sit and actually like force information in if it wasn't already there. To be, I could, that's not true. I could memorize things, but for very short periods of time. So I'd memorize the countries of the world, but they wouldn't stick. They'd just be there for the test. Then I had my brain change, which wasn't a switch. It wasn't one day I was one way and one day another way. It's still changing, it's ever changing. It started happening after my first surgery when my brain swelled. And then after the radiation, there was a more definite change. And so I went from being able to put in information, from feeling like my job in the world was to learn everything so I could save the world. I had to go through a big period of depression because I was no longer able to do that. I couldn't learn. I could take a course, not pay much attention, and ace it before, because my not paying much attention was paying attention with my ADD. It was like I'd be doing like doodling or playing card games on the computer while everyone else was listening, and I would ace the test. To not being able to use adrenaline because it's poison for people with chronic fatigue syndrome, and not knowing how to put new information in without it, not being able to concentrate on words would like, it just took way too much energy to read. And then autism, which both I've had my whole life looking back, but the difference of my ADD, which I've known I've had my whole life, and it's part of my childhood through adolescence identity, and it didn't really, I figured how to work with it, so it didn't really get in the way, versus figuring out I had autism at the age of 39 and being like, oh, that's what all of that was. Being able to look back with retrospect and see that piece of the differences. And I didn't mention this in my autism video, that one of the main reasons I did also figure out I had autism was that my child, to me, looks very neurodiverse, but yet isn't. She actually probably has ADD like everybody else in my family, but she doesn't have autism. Like she is a huge extrovert, can read people's emotions, can, like, the things she puts together, I'm like, oh, so there was something she had that I had that she didn't. And as well as these brain changes, this neurological thing that happens. Like, I no longer, my memory isn't as good as it was. I can't recall words. I can't recall people, which was always kind of a problem. The like face blindness, which I think is a common trait in autistic people as well. And I've had that my whole life. I would get people confused in my class. I have a really hard time, unfortunately, with people that are a different race than me, being able to tell them apart. And I know that to society makes you appear racist, but it's also, sorry, my brain doesn't do it. It's facial blindness. Like, I can't control what I can't control. I can apologize for it. I can try to make amends for it. I can explain it, but I can't control it. But I feel like everything that's part of my story, that is exactly what I was supposed to experience to do what I'm here to do. If I had always been, if it was just ADD and autism and I'd always been the same way, it I'd have all of these same prejudices of like propping up people that are intelligent. Like, you too could be intelligent. What a horrible trait to not be intelligent. Now I look at intelligence like I look at looks. Like, yeah, life is easier if you look nice to a point. Life is easier if you're intelligent to a point. It's actually, I think the statistics show the opposite of that. But like, if you're the opposite of intelligent, then it's definitely harder. Can't get a job if your IQ is very low. It's very, very hard to get a job, keep a job, get relationships, keep relationships. And so I've experienced two very distinct brains. In fact, I experience them sometimes in the same day. My brain's never going to go back to where it was, I don't think, where I can input all of this external information and feel like I can learn physics and chemistry and biology and economics and geography and world events all to like save the world. But if it hadn't changed, I wouldn't have had to sit with the knowledge I already knew and revamp it to figure out how we can create a world that works for everyone. If I hadn't had this experience of having both a brilliant mind and then in many areas a way less than brilliant mind, I wouldn't have the compassion and understanding for that. Right. This is not, your intelligence is a gift. You can't look down on other people who don't have it because they just don't have it. Like, their brain connections don't work the same as yours. And some of those brain connections we label as intelligence, and some of them we label as non-intelligence. And there are different types of intelligence, and most people aren't all of them. So there's ones that, again, we value more than others, but all of them are valuable. And it's your combination of intelligence that makes you valuable, even if you're low on all of them or high on all of them. It's the combination of what you bring to the table that makes our neurodiversity the key that is going to help us save this planet and create a world of abundance and connection that works for everyone. Thanks. So, my life has been drastically impacted by the internet and online communities. And so that is this video because it inspires my mission in the world. Craigslist has been responsible for my last serious relationship, a lot of other less, like, more minor relationships. A few of my best friends I've met through Craigslist I put up this goal setting group a decade ago. And one of the people that answered is one of my best friends to this day. She is amazing, amazing piece of my life. And my ex-boyfriend is an amazing piece of my life, both of whom I wouldn't have met not through Craigslist. I've had a lot of roommates. I have met nearly all of them through Craigslist when I was given the capacity to be the one to find my roommate, to have them be more compatible rather than them going through my landlord. And they are, I mean, who you live with changes your life, no matter whether it's a good or bad experience. And I've lucked out that almost all of them have been very good experiences. And a handful of them have become lifelong friends. So Craigslist is one thing that has greatly changed my life. The other thing is Facebook groups. When I became a parent and I wasn't really able to go out of the house as much with both the newborn and also just my health challenges, and realizing that I can't deal with the sensory input of the outside world, my world became very insular. And as someone who needed to like run everything by someone else so I could kind of gauge it with my inner filter without understanding that's what I was doing, I had these amazing parenting groups that I was part of. Every single one of my health challenges has a Facebook group. So when I need to get advice on that specific thing, or if I have a new thing that arises, like which one does it fall under? Wait, let's ask the single-sided deaf community. Let's ask the autistic community. Let's ask the ADD community. Let's ask the acoustic neuroma community before I got kicked out of that one for questioning the supreme leader. I'm just so grateful for the internet and what it has brought to my life, and these, especially Craigslist and the Facebook groups. Now there's Game B in the Facebook group, and I don't think I'd met half the people I have met if it hadn't been for that group, because the Twitter game B thing just doesn't work for my brain. But the groups, like I've seen people step up and be there for people they have never met before. They've had conversations in a Facebook group, but then someone doesn't have somebody to like watch their kid for a week while they're in the hospital, and people step up and help them. One of the mothers was dying of cancer, is now passed away, and the amount that the community stepped up, and the integral part of the community that she was, to watch people, you know, gather around finding like answers to questions. What is this toy? Where can I find this toy? Because it's my kid's favorite and we've lost it. Crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, and just made me see that people, when given the option, are good. We want to help each other. We want to do kindness. And even one of the groups kind of was this a way for people to help each other who were under the poverty line. Like you could request groceries, you could request certain items, and there was a bit of a scandal in there that the people who ran it were like taking more money and doing the stuff. But even in that, even in the like not so great part of humanity, there was still, right, the reason they were able to do that was by tapping into all the goodness of everyone else. So let's not discount the goodness of everyone else just because somebody skewed it to their own best interest, because we can have both. We can do both. We can create systems that aren't as easy to manipulate and still tap into the goodness of humanity. And in so doing, I can see all the ways that the internet is powerful and can connect us and enhance our good nature, and how it can do the opposite. And I have now figured out how we can have it do much more of the good with much less of the bad. And a big piece of that was seeing the blessings that both Craigslist and these Facebook groups have had on my life and the lives of people around me. Thank you. I have spent the last few weeks sharing my journey with you all. I recorded them over a couple weeks in a couple sessions, as you can tell by the fact that my wardrobe sticks for a few of them and then changes. And this is, I guess, the conclusion video, the last one, although I'm sure I will be adding more to this playlist as I think of other things too that are exactly part of my story I need to fit in this one. But this one, I want to talk about the perfection of my journey and my story and how it all comes together to make me me. The hindsight that I can access now that I just reached 40 years old, although it didn't just come when I was 40 years old, it has been coming throughout my 20s and my 30s, of being able to look back and see how my life has been impacted by these single events. And yet, if they weren't there, I would be a completely different person. I would have had different people in my life. If I hadn't been to that movie when I was a teenager, I wouldn't have had the boyfriends I had. I wouldn't have had the friends I had. If I hadn't had brain tumors, I wouldn't right now be able to take the time to sit with my own thoughts and create a world that works for everyone. I both wouldn't have the capacity because I'd be doing something completely different, and I wouldn't have the capacity because I'd be working. I wouldn't be on disability at home, unable to work. If I had known my whole life, or for my teenage years, that I was queer or autistic, that would have been completely different than learning them about that when I was 36 and 39 respectively. If I was employed, if I had a partner, I wouldn't have felt the freedom. Other people can do both of those things and be authentic, but I wouldn't have felt the freedom to be as authentic as I am, because I would have felt it would have cost me my job. I would have felt it would have cost me relationships. Now I can see that there's no payoff greater than being your authentic self. I'm going to find my purpose. Well, I found my purpose, but I'm going to find out how to make money at it, and then I won't be under the poverty line on disability. It doesn't mean I'm going to get over my disabilities, but I will find a way to make money from within my very, very limited capacity of the only thing I can do is create an omni-win world that is anti-rivalrous, that is game B and works for everyone. That is what I'm here to do. That is the capacity I have to think big picture logic and follow my path towards creating it, to share my story while we create it with other people. I can see in hindsight how every one of my disabilities and health challenges interweaves together to make me who I am, to be that my parenting, the parts that I'm amazing at and the parts that I am definitely less amazing at, in combination make me the perfect parent for my kid. Not because I'm perfect, not because I don't make mistakes, but because I'm the exact combination of talent and challenge that is giving her what she needs to be on this planet, helping her unfold to be her and her mission, her personality. I can see in hindsight, and not even in hindsight anymore, I've experienced this so much that even when I'm in the shit, when I'm depressed, when I'm anxious, when I'm having a bad experience because life has thrown me a curveball, I know there's something coming. There's learning coming. And so I'm much more comfortable on the roller coaster ride now. Just like, cool, what am I going to learn from this? What curiosity is this? And when I get the tension and the need to make this go a very specific way, I can love that because I know there's something coming from it. In fact, my whole lesson in life is like, can you accept yourself more? Can you love yourself more for exactly who you are without needing you to change? Can you love others for who they are without needing them to change? Can you save this planet without needing it to change? And that one I struggle with really. How can you have? It's a struggle. It's a clear struggle. And yet, yes, I'm getting there. I am falling in love with this planet exactly as it is because I can see everybody is exactly who they are supposed to be for the right combination of people to come together and create the tools and infrastructure and system that works for them, and then it works for everybody. We just have to allow it to happen, and we just have to start. And from where I'm sitting, I get to be the domino who starts that. And even if I don't, I am enjoying my journey and this journey towards understanding myself and standing for my vision, even if I'm not the one who gets to create it, even if it's just watching other people create it. We get to be alive at this moment in history. And I am loving watching it unfold. I have hope for a world that is beautiful because I can see it. And I can see with all of my pessimism and realism and logical mind that it was possible. Enough to step into the whatever metaphysical, spiritual, follow the next step and let it prove itself to you. I get it doesn't make sense, but it will eventually ness of this whole journey. And that it's the viewer, the people involved that get to kind of make their own judgment. And although I know I'm not the perfect person, I constantly own I don't communicate this thing well. I mess up all of the time. I also know that's happening in its perfect way because it's leading somewhere. It's unfolding as it's meant to be. The right people and right resources keep showing up. The universe keeps showing me it has my back. It has everyone's back. It's here to teach you exactly what you're here to learn. You just have to start. And you already started. You just have to realize you've started. Then it unfolds faster. I guess you don't even really need to do that. But I hope you get a bit more of my journey, and so that you can kind of follow along on the continual progression forward. Because every week, all of these little things come about. And I feel like until you can get the backstory of like these little instances that have changed my entire life, all of these things that come together to make me, Jubilee, who I am, to fulfill my purpose. You don't have to think that I'm going to fulfill my purpose. You get to watch it happen. I only 90% think that I'm the person who gets to do this. I keep creeping up and getting more and more of it. And like more like, are you sure? Like this is a little weird, guys. Like, why am I the person? Because it isn't somebody who's perfect who gets to do this. It isn't somebody who's charismatic and comes off as powerful and leads us all forward. because then it wouldn't be this. This is everybody stepping forward. Everybody realizing who they are is exactly who they're supposed to be. And together, we get to create a world that works for everyone. And now my phone's ringing. Bye. The last video in my story was published a couple days ago. And after seeing the 15 stories lined out, including the conclusion, I realized there was one glaring omission. And of course, it was the one I omitted, and that is my addictions. I am not like other addiction stories because I'm not sober. I'm not even trying to get sober. My addictions are things that I want to have in my life. I want to find a balance with them. My two addictions are media, both social media and movies and TV shows, as well as marijuana. They're both used to dumb me out, and they're both used as entertainment. And they both are sources of thought and ideas and a way to procrastinate from taking steps forward. I have been with both of these addictions for a very long time, and I have seen that the method I am using to approach them is working. Because one, the addictions have less hold on my life than they used to, and I'm happier. I don't have the same shame and guilt I did. It's still there. There's still some. That's why this video didn't get made. That's why it didn't even occur to me to make it during the laying out my other stories. It's a weird one in society. It's the one place I don't yet fully love and accept myself. I'm getting there, but I'm not there yet. And it's one place that society definitely doesn't love and accept people in. We accept some people's addictions. We accept addictions to money and power. We don't accept addictions to substances and even social media. I would not say it's so commonplace that we're okay with it, but we definitely talk about it like it's a negative thing. And it probably is. I am living my life with authenticity. So I've been given the guidance from my internal guides. I still need to figure out what better word for them. My intuition, my subconscious, whatever whatever the messages come from. That I either need to give up my addictions or I just need to own them. I need to be honest and transparent about where they are constantly. And that's kind of too many things to be transparent on. Every video, I'm not gonna update you on my health and my challenges and where my brain's at and where my addictions are at and what I did good that day and what I did bad that day. I'm sure I will do that, but I can't do all of that in every video. But nor am I hiding it. I smoke pot daily. I go through small periods of not smoking it for a while when the need calls, when I know when I feel the calling, when it's like, yep, time to give it up for a while, until it's then time to use it for a while. Pot and media have both been great fuel for my ideas and also hindrances to them. And so my journey is finding the balance. Neither of them do I want to give up completely. I don't want to never watch TV shows and movies. I like them. And I don't want to. The irony, I don't know if it's ironic. The beautiful thing is that as I've gone through this process, this journey of learning to love and accept myself, including where I am in my addictions, they've both loosened their grip on my life. I am less addicted to them than I was 6 months or a year ago or 2 years ago. Each time I go through a cycle of getting more down the rabbit hole and then back out the rabbit hole, each time it has less and less grip on my life. And it would feel like I was doing it for society to cancel it out completely. And I don't think abstinence for me is the answer. It is to follow this journey and showcase it and be authentic in it. And I just wanted to honor that the addiction story is absolutely a part of my story in the past and ongoing. And just like my health challenges, just like a lot of what I have that I've went through, I also honor that my addiction is a baby addiction compared to other people's. I can go off of it for a couple weeks. It's hard. I have to deal with willpower, and I have very little willpower when it comes to certain things. But I've done it. I don't spend our rent money on it. I don't. My kid isn't neglected and going to be taken away by Child Protective Services at any point in time. It's not as devastating as of an addiction as other people's, who really do truly need to cut it out of their life because it has a devastating impact on them, their health, their family. Mine is safe enough to stay. It gives me something and it costs me something, and it's my journey and my job, not anybody else's, to find that balance. And because I'm choosing to, it's also my job to share that journey as a piece of my overall journey in this life. So this is my addiction video. Thank you.
So I started watching that series last week. I didn't watch it all the way through because I was going to do it live on this channel. There was a subject that I hadn't covered that I meant to write a note of to cover eventually, or I can at least acknowledge I hadn't. And then I was like, wait, what was that subject? I didn't write it down. I thought I would remember it, and then it occurred to me the exact, it's relationships. I didn't do one on relationships. Also, what I said about addiction in that video in 2020 was true. That was in 2020 in February. And I was like, well, that's the opposite of addiction is connection. And it is also one of the areas that I require another human being in. I require another human being for that one. And that made clear. I was like, oh, right, this was pre-pandemic. What happened in pandemic was community got cut off, relationships got cut off. I did what was mine to do. I did what I could do. I developed online relationships, but that is very obvious. But the relationships piece, it's like that. I deleted addiction before. Now I'm like, yeah, no, totally own that. It's relationships, and that addictions were made worse. There's still, everything else still applies. They're still not spending the rent money. Nothing else is. But the opposite of addiction is connection. And when we're lonely and when we're isolated, we numb out those feelings with whatever we're addicted to, whether that's shopping, whether that's being a bitch, whether that's like just anything to numb the pain, right? And I'm in tree mode, because one of the things that did happen in the end of January, when I was connected to all of humanity and I no longer had to try and everything was in flow, was that I didn't have to try and everything was in flow, and I was able to maintain relationships and parent and do all of these things that just felt different. And I was drawing people in a way that I can see pieces of it. I can see when I step forward and release a bit, this flood of people will connect with me. Anyway, I need people and I need support to be able to. I don't know if I finished that story, but I've been on for nearly 2 hours, even though I wasn't on. I was watching, learning, listening, hearing the relationship piece throughout it, hearing like, that I can see that I made an entire global tech cooperative that fixed me not needing to go on a date, right? Like absolutely that is what happened. And I still fixed the world by doing that. Now I have to fix the relational piece. That's the whole point, is I don't have to fix the relational piece. I can't fix that piece. It's not mine to fix. I need someone else to be that piece, right? Every relationship is one-to-one, and it's two people choosing. And I don't know what that relationship is that I'm asking someone to join, right? That is very clear. It is chaotic. It is weird. It is whatever. I don't know. Who wants to come deal with I don't know, right? in one-on-one video chat in a way that someone's gonna have to do everything that's not within my ven. I'm just owning who and what I am at a deep way. That I'm gonna word salad more and more at the moment because I need to go take a nap, and that's what watching for 2 hours will do. The next broadcast is already public to hit if you want to watch the next one, because that is what I am doing. I will not necessarily be going live at the time that it says, but that way it should notify if you say to be notified. I do believe. See you next